Today we're going to be looking at a poem from the Love and Relationships cluster. We're going to be looking at Climbing My Grandfather by Andrew Waterhouse. This poem is probably one of the strangest and most abstract out of all of the love and relationships poems. It's an extended metaphor about a grandson climbing his grandfather, and he compares him to a mountain. And as he reaches up each stage of the mountain, he notices and observes details in his grandfather that make him feel a connection to him, as well as teaching the grandson about himself too. So this poem is really about getting to know who you actually are and where you have come from on a deeper, more spiritual level. Let's read it. I decide to do it free, without a rope or net. First, the old brogues, dusty and cracked, an easy scramble onto his trousers, pushing into the weave, trying to get a grip. By the overhanging shirt, I change direction, traverse along his belt to an earth-stained hand. The nails are splintered and give good purchase. The skin of his finger is smooth and thick like warm ice. On his arm, I discover the glassy ridge of a scar. Place my feet gently in the old stitches and move on. At his still, firm shoulder, I rest for a while in the shade, not looking down, for climbing has its dangers. Then pull myself up the loose skin of his neck to a smiling mouth to drink among teeth. Refreshed, I cross the screed cheek to stare into his brown eyes, watch a pupil slowly open and close, then up over the forehead, the wrinkles well spaced and easy, to his thick hair, soft and white at this altitude, reaching for the summit, where gasping for breath, I can only lie watching clouds and birds circle, feeling his heat, knowing the slow pulse of his good heart. Right, so we're going to go through this poem bit by bit, make sure we know exactly what's going on, and along the way, I'm going to pick out around 3 of the juiciest quotations. And by juicy, I mean quotations that have interesting language devices that we can analyze, words that we can zoom into, and we can give multiple interpretations, so that if this poem comes up in your exam, you are able to write at least 3 long, detailed, analytical paragraphs about it. Let's start from the beginning. The poem begins with the speaker announcing his intention to climb his grandfather, who is metaphorically a mountain. And he says, I decide to do it free without a rope or net. So the poet writes in the first person and present tense, immediately creating this sense of excitement at the prospect of the climb. The rope and net are references to equipment, and it could be seen as metaphors for safety and security. But he's just climbing without any of that. He doesn't want equipment, he doesn't need any precautions. This could symbolize the trust he has in his grandfather, or perhaps his attitude that he feels like he's got nothing to lose. He says, first, the old brogues, dusty and cracked. So the speaker starts at the bottom, by the feet, like you do, bottom of the mountain. So he notices his grandfather's dusty and cracked shoes. And these can be seen as a metaphor for his age and experience. He has seen and endured a lot over the years, just like his shoes. He says, an easy scramble onto his trousers, pushing into the weave, trying to get a grip. The climb begins with an easy scramble, but quickly escalates to pushing and trying. And the shifting verbs here and his struggle to get a grip demonstrate the increasing level of challenge literally, or he could be metaphorically losing his grip and becoming more nervous because he understands now the magnitude of the journey that he has ventured on. He says, by the overhanging shirt, I change direction, traverse along his belt. So basically, when he reaches the granddad's shirt, like halfway, he changes direction and he starts walking along his grandfather's belt, which sounds a little bit weird, but Waterhouse could be reflecting on deliberately taking a different path from his ancestors and making different life choices. Like, we all follow our parents when we're young, but it takes a lot of reflection and introspection and bravery to fight the cycle and choose a different path, to do something different. Walking along the belt means he's not going any higher, so he's paused his climb. You know, a belt, I think it's really interesting that he's mentioned a belt, because a belt provides security, it keeps your trousers up. So maybe being close to his grandfather makes him feel some relief from the struggles of life, the climb. Structurally, the caesura, the punctuation, supports that interpretation of taking a break, because that punctuation mark kind of creates a pause. He then says, to an earth-stained hand, the nails are splintered and give good purchase. So basically, at the end of the belt, he notices his grandfather's earth-stained hand, and I want to analyze that. The image of the earth-stained hand symbolizes the grandfather's rural work. The hands have been weathered by the environment over time. So he's obviously spent a life in manual labor, perhaps farming. Or it could also symbolize how down to earth and pure the grandfather is, juxtaposing this world of materialism and superficiality that the grandson is trying to escape. Think about it, hands, right? Hands are a part of the human body which can give affection, like strokes. And if you give someone a helping hand, it's often an idiom that's used to connote support. Therefore, the grandson is saying that he gets comfort from being near his grandfather in this way. Then there's a description of the splintered nails, and that's symbolic of the grandfather's old age and experience. His nails have seen struggles and challenges in life. The fact that it says they give good purchase to the speaker is a metaphor for how his grandfather's wisdom and experience benefit the grandson. He is able to grip those nails, and therefore his granddad's experience, and that benefits his climb towards his own self-discovery and his desire to find his own identity. The caesura indicates a pause, which could be symbolizing the time the speaker takes to absorb the lessons he is learning from the climb. He's just taking a moment, caesura, punctuation, pause. What have I learned? What am I learning about who I am? The speaker then continues to observe this area and notices that the skin of his finger is smooth and thick, like warm ice. And I want to analyze this quotation in detail. The temperature imagery, the sense of warmth, signifies the reassurance that the narrator feels when he is close to his grandfather. Even in his sternness, the ice, the narrator feels warmer than he does in the real world, which he has escaped. There's sensory description in skin, and it demonstrates the affection the speaker feels. It emanates from this physical contact with his grandfather. He describes the skin using the adjectives smooth and thick, which juxtaposes the craggy texture of mountains, but it emphasizes the vast nature of the strength he provides. The grandfather is a mixture of being both sensitive and resilient at the same time. The simile like warm ice here uses an oxymoron, warm ice, because it's impossible for ice to be formed in warm conditions. Otherwise it will melt into water. So the grandfather has achieved the impossible, which reveals the grandson's childlike admiration for him. There's enjambment just before the simile, which speeds up the pace of the line and shows that the speaker is eager to explore his grandfather in more detail, more quickly. In the context of the poet's own depression and mental health issues, discovering more about his grandfather seems to be therapeutic for him. However, We then have our first example of a negative experience. It says, on his arm, I discover the glassy ridge of a scar. Place my feet gently in the old stitches and move on. We can analyze this quotation in more detail. Discover connotes new learning. You discover something. So he's on a journey of self-exploration. The scar is a visual symbol of pain. When you hurt yourself, there's a scar. It implies that the grandfather has suffered in his life. And that noun, ridge, uses mountain imagery, as though the grandfather, like a mountain, has been eroded by the wind and the rain, the hardships of life. I really like the adjective glassy. I think that's really interesting because glass reflects an image. You see yourself in glass. So it's like the speaker is able to see his own pain, his own suffering in his granddad's scars. And I guess that reference to glass also connotes fragility. Glass is fragile, to show how careful the speaker has to be on this journey. The arm is what humans use to embrace each other. And that shows that this is where he finds solace, in his grandfather's arms. The speaker then uses his grandfather's previous pain and traumas, the old stitches, to find a new grip and move on with his climb. And that's kind of beautiful because he has been able to learn lessons from his grandfather's previous mistakes and use them to help him in his own life. It says, at his still firm shoulder, I rest for a while in the shade, not looking down, for climbing has its dangers. At his grandfather's still firm shoulder, the speaker finds a shaded place to rest and recover. He doesn't want to look down now and feels fear for the first time. If he looks down, he will have to acknowledge the life he's left behind and the person he used to be. You know, when he says climbing has its dangers, he started so confident. Do you remember at the start of the poem, he was like, I don't need any equipment. He was fearless. But as he's got higher, as he has learned more, he has realized what he has to lose. The idea of risks, the danger that surrounds him. It's like when I was younger, I could go to Thorpe Park and sit on all the roller coasters. It didn't matter, I didn't have anything to lose. But when you get older and you realize the dangers and you realize what you got to lose if you die, you become more scared. And that's kind of what's happening here. He then says, pull myself up the loose skin of his neck to a smiling mouth to drink among teeth. Refreshed, I cross the screed cheek. That metaphor of drinking among teeth symbolizes the narrator gaining wisdom from his grandfather's words and advice. But it also conveys the way his grandfather replenishes and refreshes him, quenches his thirst to get to know himself and his heritage. The speaker feels rejuvenated enough to now continue towards his grandfather's cheeks, as if he's been drinking from a fresh mountain spring. He says to stare into his brown eyes, watch a pupil slowly open and close. That's a real sign of emotional intimacy and connection when the speaker stares into his grandfather's brown eyes. Readers get a sense of the strong bond that they share. The fact that the granddad's pupils are like slowly opening and closing, it suggests this like sense of slowness, which is indicative of his old age. And that really juxtaposes the narrator's youthful energy. It says, then up over the forehead, the wrinkles well spaced and easy to his thick hair, soft and white at this altitude, reaching for the summit. Now, in a metaphorical sense, the grandfather's wrinkles are the ridges that act as footholds on a mountain, whilst the soft, white, thick hair is the snow that settles on the mountain top, where the altitude is high and the temperature is low. He finally then succeeds. He reaches the summit. He's got to the top of the mountain, which means he has got to know his grandfather in every way possible. He says, "We're gasping for breath. I can only lie watching clouds and birds circle." The narrator is exhausted now. He's gasping for breath because of the physical strain caused by the climb. But there's also this sense of beauty from seeing the world from his grandfather's eyes. He's close to nature here, as the older generation are linked more with nature and a life before technology took over and everyone's on TikTok. The speaker clearly feels at peace in this new position, feeling his heat, knowing the slow pulse of his good heart. The use of temperature as a motif is used again. The speaker can now see the caring, nurturing qualities in his granddad. And the slow pulse juxtaposes the busyness of life. The poem ends with a final tribute to his grandfather's good heart, cementing the love the speaker feels for him and the admiration he has for his grandfather's kindness. The climb was a journey towards his grandfather's heart, and it was therefore a deliberate attempt to reunite and connect with a grandfather who he clearly loved. Now, structurally, the poem is written in a single stanza, and this is significant because it visually mirrors a mountain. It also represents the length and the height of the climb. The grandfather has lived a long life to be the firm, stable, and resolute man that he is. And the lines are irregular, long and short, and they use a mixture of both enjambment and caesura, and perhaps that could reflect the ups and downs of the climb, as well as visualize the crags and ridges of a mountain. So that's your analysis done. We have some interesting quotations, we have language devices that we can zoom into, we know about structure, but that's not enough in your exam. If you're looking for those higher grades, you need to mention something called context in your essay. Context basically just means explain what was happening during the time the poem was written, or tell me something about the poet's life and link that to the poet's message. Like, why did they write this poem? What were they trying to tell the reader? Some interesting context points for Climbing My Grandfather are: Waterhouse was a teacher, an environmentalist, a poet, and a musician. He spent his childhood in the northeast of England, and a lot of his work focused on the environment. He even had a master's in environmental science, and he wrote a series of natural walk guidebooks. Unfortunately, Waterhouse struggled with mental illness, and eventually he took his own life at the age of 42. And there you have it, a full analysis of Climbing My Grandfather. I hope you found this video helpful. If you did, give it a like, and don't forget to check out the rest of the videos in this series.